Oh, thanks. Is that all the water we've got? Here, sweetheart. We near a town?
Back that way. Maybe there's a homestead up ahead.
Don't you know what's wrong with it?
Try keep out of the sun. I'll be back as soon as I can.
Come here, love.
That scene has all the ingredients for another tragedy. He's walking off looking for help. He hasn't got a clue where it is. It could be just around the first bend, but it could easily be 100 miles away. Now, he has no water. He has not even got a hat on. He's left the wife and child there. They have no water. Now, in this temperature out here, he would last 4 hours normally. But the way he's doing it, probably 1 hour. And then he'll be a very distressed person. The risks that these people have taken coming into the outback unprepared is unbelievable to me. Isn't this marvellous? To be alone in such a landscape as this. It's something I feel that every Australian should have the opportunity of doing, because this is unique. But beneath all that beauty, there is the harshness. It's part of the beauty. But you must constantly be aware, if you want to travel this outback of Australia, that there can be danger. This is my survival kit for the bush. First, my swag. You must have somewhere to sleep. Then, in next importance, my water containers. I've put in an extra one here to show you. I've got a 4-gallon one. I don't like these. I prefer them in 1 or 2 gallons, because if this busts, I lose 4 gallons. If they bust, I only lose 1 gallon or 2 gallons. Much safer. I've got my petrol in jerry cans. I've only got 1 jerry can because it's only a small trip. If I'm going on bigger trips, I take more. Esky for me tucker and a coldie. That's the food position. Now, here I have me toolkit. Toolkit is very important. You can't do repairs if you haven't got the right tools. How can you get a bloody nut off if you can't find a spanner to fit it? Have a reasonable toolkit. Radiator hoses, fan belt. Very importantly, a pump. Now, I prefer the air pump that hooks onto the engine and pump the tyres up. You can have a guts buster if you like. I don't like them. I've got a first aid kit. Get a first aid kit, make it up to suit yourself. Just things you prefer. Now, here, this is what I call my box of tricks. I've got dozens of little odds and ends in here, but a couple of very important ones. First of all is the coil. Now, if you break down and you've done your coil, you've had it, unless you have another coil. So you must carry one of these. A set of points and a condenser. Now, if you burnt out a set of points in the bush, you would have to have somebody come along with the same make of car, with a spare set and prepared to give them to you. That's ridiculous. So don't do this. With these things, all you're doing by having them with you is buying them a little earlier, because you'll be up for them this year or next year, and it's for your safety that I'm talking about. To most people living in the cities, this is the real outback, a deserted, empty country with the road running away forever. And they look around, all of a sudden it occurs to them, I wonder what would happen if I broke down here. On a road like this, they would have no worries. It's a bitumen road, and they only put these roads down where there's a lot of traffic. Stop by your car and wait. Somebody's going to come along. I go on these painting trips 3 or 4 times a year. Normally, I use a 4-wheel drive vehicle, but for this trip, I've taken an average family car just to show you that you can go into the bush with practically any car as long as you realise its capabilities. I've been painting scenes like these for the last 10 years. I can't help it. This country fascinates me. I've been around the world a couple of times. But to me, the Australian outback has something special about it. Some of this country is desolate, dry, hot and bare. You have to be prepared to be your own food supply, your own petrol supply and your own mechanic. Out here there's no friendly service stations. They're very few and far between. Just the odd sign to warn the unwary traveller. I've come across many families like this. Good people who understand city living, but they do not know how to travel safely in the bush. This has got to be ridiculous. These people have come out here with just their own personal luggage. Like, there's no toolkit, there's no spares, I can't see any petrol, and there's no water. This chap couldn't start this car. The odds are it's either petrol or it's spark. Now, I'm going to do a very simple test on the spark for a start off. And what I do, I pull the centre wire out of the distributor. And I hold that in my hand. Then I take the top off the distributor and just push the top out the road somewhere, so it's not in my road. Now, with the car switched on, I then flick the points here, and I should get a nice blue spark across onto the body. And if I get that blue spark, there's nothing wrong with the electrical. And there's the blue spark. No worries at all there. That's good. Now that shows me there's nothing wrong with that electrical system at all. It's got to be the petrol now. Now what I'm going to do here is get the air cleaner off the top of this carburetor, just put it out the road, and I should be able to work the accelerator and squirt petrol in there, but there's none. Now this is the trouble, there's no petrol squirting into there at all, so I've got a blockage somewhere between the carburetor and the petrol tank. Now don't start pulling things to pieces for a minute, just look. Follow it along, come down here, petrol pump. Ah, we've got it, mate. I've got a fuel filter here, and I get him off with more garbage in it than there is in the rubbish dump. Have a look at this. Paint, water, petrol. That's what's caused the problem. That's blocked the fuel from coming through to the carburetor. Now either got to put a new one of those on or connect the line together. But we can get petrol through to that and it will go.
You don't trust me bloody petrol, eh?
No, mate, always suspicious of bush supplies, I'm telling you. Thank God they're out here, we'll never get any petrol. What I'd done there was tipped a cup of metho in my tank. And the idea of that was that if I got any water out of this petrol, which you'd get in the bush, simply because of condensation out of the drums, that metho would break it up and it would go through and you would burn it. And then there would no risk. So that's protection. You remember down the track when those people were broke down and the fuel filter was blocked? Now that was caused mainly by water in there. There was a lot of other rubbish, but the water had finally blocked that filter up. If they'd have put metho in, no hassle at all, it would have gone through. The thing I like about coming out into the bush is all this nature. Look around and enjoy it all. Like, I've come hundreds of miles to get off the beaten track, and to see something like this is just marvellous. This is what it's all about. You've got to enjoy the thing. And like in a place like... There's two very important things in a situation like this. One is water, which I have plenty of, and the other one is patience, which I have plenty of. Now, when I bogged that bloody thing up there, I was furious. That is not the state of mind to be in to do anything. You're far better off, sit down quietly, boil the billy, relax, think about it all. This isn't much of a sandbog. If I had been concentrating instead of bloody talking, I wouldn't have ever got into the thing. Now, what you've got to do is just let your tyres down enough so that they're not cutting into the sand. They're rolling on top of the sand. And then don't let anybody get near a shovel, for God's sake. The first thing they'll do is start digging you deeper. All you need to do is just get down like this, scrape out the sand from in front of the tyres. When you've done the four of them, just get in the car and just drive the damn thing out. Now, these tyres are too flat to drive safely around this country, so I must pump them up again. I always pump my spare tyre to 100-pound pressure, and then when I get problems like this, I transfer the air out of the spare tyre into these tyres. No hassles, cost nothing, nice and simple. I've made up this air transfer hose, and what I'm going to do is just transfer the air out of my spare tyre into the flat tyre and pump it up. It's as simple as that. And there is no problem with pumping your spare tyre up to 100-pound pressure. It's quite safe at this. One of our recent tragedies in Australia, a woman and a child perished. In country, very similar to this. Now, they did not die of lack of water. They died of exposure. That's the killer out in this country. But you've got to remember that people and animals have lived in this country for thousands of years, and they've worked out how to handle this. Look, let me take you and show you how the kangaroo handles it. Beautiful shady tree, lovely dried up creek bed. What a nice place to make a camp. This is the kangaroo camp. He's come in here and he's dug this hot soil off the top, down here to the damp stuff where it's cooler. And he lays in that, and even the wind funneled along this creek keeps him cool. And with the shade, perfect spot. Like when you look around here, dry creek, there's not much evidence of life. But there is life here. When I see plants as green as this, I know that their roots would have to be going down into moisture because they couldn't be that green in an area as dry as this. This bank has lots of tracks, most of them kangaroos. They've been coming and going out of this creek. They all seem to be leading to the one spot where they've been scraping around. Much of Australia's water is below the surface in huge basins and underground streams. Sometimes these streams flow near the surface and form a soak, just like this. Nothing wrong with that, that's beautiful water. Probably a dash of whiskey to improve it, but marvellous. They're all working very nicely. I don't think I'll go thirsty tomorrow. Quite pleased with this. And have a look at the rest. Here we have a variety of different plants. I've put saltbush in this one, going all right. Blue bush in this one, that's condensing nicely. And this one's the squashy stuff. I've got bullocky bush and other squashy plants. Now, you can use any plant, any of the foliage off the trees, any plant you see right throughout Australia. That sun that's dragging the moisture out of me is dragging the moisture out of him there, just the same. So I've turned the thing around. It's working for me now. So really, there is no excuse to go thirsty in a country like this. There's enough blue bush out there to have a bath if you had enough plastic bags. One of the most common problem areas in the bush is a flat battery. Now, that battery does two things. It supplies power to the starter motor to turn the engine over, and very importantly, it supplies power to the coil to fire the spark plugs. Now, although that battery is flat to the stage it would, and it wouldn't turn this engine over, there's still enough power going through that coil to give me the spark at the spark plugs to start it. Now, that's all I need. Now I've chocked all the wheels. All I have to do is jack the rear wheel on the driver's side up and make sure that it's solid, because when this car starts up, I don't want it to fall off the jack. I turn on the ignition and I put the car in top gear. Then I'm going to use the wheel as a crank to start the car. Now be careful of clearance for your hand, because this can be a little dangerous. Now, that wasn't easy, but the point is I've got the car going. That's the important thing. Now, supposing that I had no battery at all. Somebody had pinched it or lost it or whatever you like. There's no battery here. Most people have another battery in their car and they don't realise it. My spare batteries are in this. Just a torch. Now, these batteries are not going to have enough power to turn the starter motor, but they've got plenty of power to give me the spark at the plugs to start the engine. And in this case, I've got two 6-volt ones. You don't have to have 6 volt. You can have the small ones and join them together, but you must have 12 volts when they're joined. First thing is to connect the two batteries together, positive to negative. Now this gives me 12 volts. Now, I've taken the wires off the coil on the positive side, so I put my own wire on this and I connect it to the positive side of the torch battery, which is here. The last thing is to connect the earth of my batteries to the earth lead of the car. Now, after you've done this, all you have to do is tape everything up solid so it won't rattle about and come loose, then start your car up. I've driven a car like this for over 100 kilometres, just on torch batteries like these, and it was still going strong when I stopped. In any case, there's no problems about it getting you to help if your batteries failed. This is the dog-proof fence. It was built many years ago just to keep the dingo from coming into the sheep country. There are gates similar to this every 30 or 40 kilometres all the way along this fence, and they must be properly closed after use. These signs always fascinate me. Every time I come to one of these gates, I'm tempted to leave the thing open. And I look around and I wonder which bush the bloke's going to jump up from and say, "You've left me gate open, give me $100. If you're going to have any trouble in the bush, the sooner you know about it, the better. Now, the person that gets out to open the gates is the only one that's seeing the outside of the car and the load all the time. And it's very important for him to check the tyres, look at the load, and especially when he's closing the gate, look back to where the car has stood. Because if there's been anything wrong, say like a hole in your gearbox, there'll be a little pool of oil where it'd only be a drip if you're driving along. So this is important, and you chop it all off before it starts. This fence is the longest fence in the world. This even makes the Americans jealous. 10,000 kilometres of it. It stretches from the Great Divide in Queensland up to the Gulf country, then down to the New South Wales border, and then snakes its way across South Australia and finishes up in the Bight, near the Western Australian border. That is amazing. 10,000 kilometres of a strong high fence just to keep a wild dog away from the sheep. That shows you how important this grazing industry was then, when Australia rode on the sheep's back, and just how powerful these people were to be able to get a project like this started and then finished, and that fence has worked. This is the finest wool growing area in the world. These sheep have been specially bred to thrive in these conditions. They produce wool that is most sought after for the export market. This fence has been so effective that there are very few dingoes south of it. So few, in fact, that one of the dingo's main foods has flourished to plague proportions. The dingo was the kangaroo's only natural enemy, possibly drought being the other one. But now south of the fence, there are no dingoes. And consequently, the roos have bred into vast numbers, and the whole situation has got completely out of hand. This country is ideal for the kangaroo. The only thing that was lacking was water. Once the station owner supplied the water, you have a most perfect environment. I've seen ridiculous situations where a station owner had 5,000 sheep on his place and 20,000 kangaroos. Unbelievable. I remember the first time I came to these huts. At that time, this fence was patrolled by camels, and it wasn't until after the war, when four-wheel drives come, that the four-wheel drive took over from the camel. Now that's all gone. We've lost something with this. They race around now, the gasoline cowboys patrolling the fence every now and again. When you came to these huts, every hut had a character in it, and they were a special breed of people. They had to be to live out in an area like this. In that bag is the greatest invention that was ever offered to the outback traveller. I would have paid $1,000 for that a few years ago when I was in the bush all the time, because bogs drove me mad. I hate them. If I got in a mud bog, this is the thing to get it out. Look what's in here. That's all it is. Is a bag with a lead on it. Put that under me car. Just there. And then all I do is connect the connection. to the exhaust pipe, and that'll fit any exhaust pipe. How easy was that? All we got to do now, if it was a mud bog, clean the hole out, put some sticks or stones or piece of tin, whatever you can find, let the car come down on it, then go and do the other side. And all I've got to do to let it down, to stop it, take that off there, let it down here any time I like, just steadily. And I drive away laughing. And if you can tell me anything easier than that to get out of a bog, I'll buy it. One of the main problem areas I find that travellers into the outback have is getting not so much really lost, but spun around. They get onto wrong roads and this type of thing. Now, the easiest way to eliminate this is after you've had dinner overnight and you've settled down, get your map out. Put it on, say, the bonnet of the car, put north to north, face it up level, and then have a look where you're going to travel next day. And just for instance, you look and you see that you're travelling west all day. So when it happens that the road branches into two or a turn-off comes up or something like this, you can very easily pick the right one by just looking at your compass, bearing in mind that you're going to go west. That's fencing wire. I bet everybody that has been in the outback has done exactly what I done there. Had to climb under their car to unhook a bit of this stuff. You've got to do it because if it wraps around your diff, it can chop your brake hoses in halves. Trailers and caravans can be a nightmare because you can't hear it. It's behind and it chops the seals out, they finish up the dirt, gets into the bearings and you've got big problems. But don't knock it. This stuff has replaced more parts in motor cars over the years than probably anything in the bush. They've used it for everything, for nuts and bolts, for wiring this up and everything. I'll show you what I'm going to do now. As soon as I get this cut off, a piece like that, we will show you how to make a compass. With a piece of fencing wire, I wrap around an ordinary piece of electrical wire. Then by touching these ends of this electrical wire onto the terminals of the battery, I make an electromagnet. My piece of fencing wire is now a permanent magnet. Why I've come over here, whenever you want to read a compass, get at least 30 or 40 feet away from a car, because there's too many influencing things in a car with your compass. Not only this compass, any compass. And also another thing, when you've got a compass like this, try and get out the wind. A little bit breezy today and it's very hard to settle down. Now, what I've done, I've just stuck a bit of taper in here with a bit of cotton on. And I'd hold that compass up. And it's roughly pointing that way and this way. So look, we'll draw a line here. That is roughly the line of this compass. Now, some smart person's going to say to me, oh yes, that's bright. Which end's north and which end's south? Good question. But because we are in the southern hemisphere, every shadow cast by the sun is cast to the south side. So if I put up a stick and we see which way the shadow of that's pointing, it's pointing that way. So that is the south end. So that must be the north end. There you are. I've showed you how to make Absalom's bush compass. No risk with it. But you must know what hemisphere you're in. And if you don't know that, then you're completely bushed. This Australia of ours is a very dry place. And when you look around an area like this, it makes you realise just how dry. Like if it wasn't for this water here, all this area wouldn't be worth a tinker's curse. The worst thing that can happen to this water is for it to become polluted. The most common way that happens is when people put soap in it, because then the stock won't drink it. They can't drink it. You wouldn't, I wouldn't. And consequently, they perish. Look, I've seen people sitting in there having a bath, just a bath the same as you do at home. I've seen 800 sheep perish because a person used soap powder to do their washing in there. Now, when all this happens, this property owner, he becomes very angry. You can't blame him because you've probably cost him thousands of dollars. His stock has perished just through one thoughtless act.
How you going? Oh, g'day, Jack. How are you? All right, not bad. It's still pretty warm. You want a cup of tea?
Bloody oath, that's the best news for today, I've heard, mate.
Rightio. Good on you.
John Ferguson and his wife Sue are typical of the bush people throughout Australia. They've lived here all their lives and they will help anyone in trouble.
Hello, Sue.
Hello, Jack.
How you going?
Very well, thanks.
But some travellers do not realise that these people have a large property to run with plenty of problems without the tourists adding to them.
We're not the dinky-dyed tourists, we don't, but it's these fly-by-nighters or the weekenders, say they knock off work about 4 o'clock or so and, you know, grab a few echoes and jump in the car and away they go, head up north, you know, in the outback. And they're the ones we have the most problem with because they usually leave without a jack or...
No preparation at all?
No preparation whatsoever, you know, and they just hop an old jalopy and they think, oh, she'll be right. She's all right on the bitumen probably, but gets out here in the corrugation and the rocks and next thing they're calling in on you for tyres and tubes, you name it, you know.
It's supposed to be a garage.
Do you have any other problems?
Well, like that time when we came back from the Angipina races that day. There we are, driving down the road, and I looked at the water up the road here, and there's this 2 caravans right next to the trough, and they had a line of washing from the windmill to the overflow. No worries.
What, they pulled up alongside the
yes,
trough?
right alongside the trough. And the cattle, that was the main watering point for about, 150 head of cattle, because they wouldn't come in.
Of course they wouldn't.
That's the sort we call terrorists.
Most station owners don't call travellers tourists anymore. Like Sue, they call them terrorists. It's a pity it's got this way, because it's only a small percentage of the tourists that cause this trouble. But if you are in real trouble, they will all help you. Don't demand help. Just ask politely. I've never known one of them that would turn their back on anybody in trouble. I've got nothing against the Poms. I think they're marvellous.
I'm all right, Stu. You're right, mate.
Listen, and if you're a mechanic, I don't give a bugger what you are, where you're from. Always a handy man.
He's handy, all right, on the job.
What do you think of these hotels here now, compared with the English pub?
Oh, these are more homely.
You think these are more homely?
Oh, yeah.
What about when you go in over there and you get the hot beer and the cold pies?
Oh, you don't get the hot beer over there, no.
What are you talking about? I was in England, never had a cold drink all the time I was there. I never like to go past these bush pubs. They always fascinate me, because inside there can be friends that I've known for many years, and I like to say hello to them and find out what's going on in the district. But the thing you must remember is, you must observe their rules. Look, I'll tell you a funny story. There was a chap once pulled up at the bush pub. Now, he's only wearing a pair of shorts and a pair of thongs. And when you walk into this particular pub, there's a big sign saying, a singlet or shirt must be worn in the bar, otherwise you will not be served. So he ignored this and went to the counter and said, look, can I have a beer? The barmaid looked at him and pointed to the sign. She said, would you please read that? He looked at the sign, looked at her, and says, you can stick your bloody beer. This chap stormed out of the hotel, went to his car, which was standing by the petrol pump, and sat in it for about a half an hour. Nobody came near him. So then he comes into the bar again and he said, look, doesn't anybody serve petrol? And the barmaid said, yes, I serve petrol. But the management of it told me to inform you that we're going to stick our bloody petrol. They left him there all that day, and next morning he comes into the barmaid and he said, look, I am very sorry about yesterday. May I have some petrol? She said, of course you can have petrol. She said, we always like serving nice people. I wonder how many people realise what they're looking at here. These are not ordinary stones. Each one of those stones has been carted up here, specially selected for its hardness or its softness or for its grinding qualities, whatever it may be. This is an Aboriginal campsite, a workshop where they've worked for thousands of years making their tools. If your house got burnt down, and I was the first one there, I would expect to find everything that you would have in a house. Your pots and pans and knives and forks, and all this is in this whole area. And this is why it's so exciting to come to a place like this, untouched. This is a treasure house here. This is our heritage, all through here. Oh, look at this. That is something. That is a piri point. We don't know what they made that for. A lot of people say spear points, but there's no evidence. But that is marvellous workmanship. Look at this magnificent discordal scraper. See that work on that, the secondary work? Beautiful stuff. Just superb. These are marvellous tradesmen here. Here's a very interesting one. Look, these here are little microliths. They're so beautifully made. See the edge they've got on those? Now, he would get, say, 4 or 5 of these, and he cuts them into a stick, puts them in the stick, so they're sticking up something like that. And when he gets them in with all glued up and everything, then he can saw with this. And look, there's dozens of them. These little discordal scrapers. Look, little things. The same as the bigger one I just showed you, like this. And then look at the size of them. It's just unbelievable. Here's one. He hasn't quite finished. See, he's made this side, nothing on this side, and he's probably broke the point off and said, fuck the thing and threw it out. This is what would go on here. But this whole place, look, there's another little thing here. If you look down here, because the Aborigines camped here, they had to have food. And look, see all the pieces of bone? Look at it here. This is from the animals they've eaten. All over the place here, you see? Look, another one there, see? This is what observation in the bush is all about. Noticing things like this. If there's been that many Aborigines here, and it's taken a lot to do this work, then they must have had one thing, water. This doesn't look much now, but this would have been where they got their water. They would have camped over there, and this is where they've got it from. But when you look at it closely, there's a soak under here. This water is gradually draining in here. And they would have cleaned all this out. It wouldn't be a mess like this. And of course, when it rained, would have filled up probably 5 or 6 feet, which would have been an added bonus. This is as near to a permanent waterhole as you could get. But it could dry up in a severe drought, and then they'd be forced to move on. But then the Aborigines were known as nomadic people, and they used to move from water to water because they had no means of carrying it. I believe the greatest thing the white man ever gave the Aborigine was a billy can, because he gave him the means of carrying water. Previously to this, they used to have to mark their waters, like this, with water markers, cans of stones. This is a waterhole. It's a natural spring. It's never been known to go dry. It's marked by an Aboriginal water marker and would have been used by the Aborigines for thousands of years, but now is used by the white man. A lot of people often ask me that if I broke down out in the bush, totally broke down, no, couldn't do a thing about the vehicle, I'm on Shanks's ponies, could I survive? And I've said, well, yes, I've been around this country a long time, and I look for nature signs. Now, I've been following this cattle pad for a while, and I've been waiting for another cattle pad to come in and join it, because when that happens, that's like an arrowhead. In dry country like this, cattle water every day. Now look, it's not unreasonable to expect water to be within walking distance. Now that I've found this water, I'm safe. I've got no worries at all, because I know that the station owner that owns this property is going to come around at least twice a week. So even if I've missed him today, I've only got to wait 3 days at the most. The first time I ever came to the Flinders Ranges, I was about 13 years of age. And I couldn't believe it. These magnificent colours, the mountains. And I was fascinated by them. And I think they've haunted me in a way ever since. I did my first painting in this very area, and I thought it was marvellous. I was that thrilled with this. And yet when I look back at it now, it was a great heap of rubbish. I can't see now what I seen in it then. But you couldn't get this painting off me for anything. I think when you come in here, especially to paint or to take photographs, you've got to get a feel for the place. So what I like to do now is to come in, just drive around the first day and have a look at all the afternoon lights, and then the next morning have a look at all the morning lights. And I get this feel for it. And then it's like magic painting, because I know what's coming. I've seen the morning lights yesterday, and I know tomorrow morning they'll be magic. This is what it does to me. I think really, this is one of the treasure spots of Australia. Driving into these creek beds is a real experience. These most magnificent gums, and often the creek running with water, like it could be paradise itself. Unbelievable scenery. But just a word of warning. It doesn't rain that often in this country, but when it does, a thunderstorm could dump 5 or 6 inches back in those hills. And yet down here we haven't got one spot of rain. We haven't a clue what's happening. Let me tell you a story that my people have told to me many times about probably one of the worst tragedies that ever happened here in the Flinders Ranges. A chap by the name of Harry Crocombe had loaded his 2 daughters into his car at Port Augusta, plus a girlfriend of theirs, and they were going up to Corn. And they were coming down this road, and a day similar to this. A few spots of rain, heavy clouds, and back in the ranges, there'd been 4 or 5 inches of rain, a very heavy downpour, and all this was building up. Just before Harry pulled into this creek, approached it, another chap from Corn had stopped over here, a chap by the name of Harry Treberkey. He pulled up because he'd heard a roar, and he wondered what this roar was. And as he looked up the creek here, he sees a wall of water coming down, 15 to 20 feet high, and at the same moment, Crocombe and his family is driving into this creek, and he waved frantically, trying to go back, go back, go back. And they seen him, and they probably thought, who in the hell's he waving to? And they didn't take no notice of him. He drove into this creek as this water came, and whoosh, the lot. 1 minute, the whole thing's all over. All that was left here to show of that was the seat out of Crocombe's car, 15 feet up in the branches of a tree. And I remember my mother telling me many times, when she used to go down the street shopping, she used to go past Mrs. Crocombe's place. And this dear old lady, even 10 years later, would be out leaning over the fence, looking, hoping for that car to drive back with her family that had been wiped out in this creek. Anybody that would camp down there would be very, very foolish. You must come up out of the creek bed. Then there's no risk of water worrying you at all, and also you've got to get away from underneath those big branches on the gum trees, because when you get a change of temperature, they just snap off and come down. It's always best to make your camp before it gets dark. While there's plenty of light, go and get your wood, set your camp up, roll your swag out, do all these little things. There's no hassle. There's nothing worse than chasing around out there looking for wood in the dark. Then you can sit back and enjoy this, the best time of the day. I've got my fire going, my billy on, my tucker. If you ever had kangaroo cooked in a camp oven, it is really something. It's been nice having you with me on this trip. I've had a lot of fun showing you all these tips, and I'm sure you've got a lot of pleasure out of it. If you take notice of me, the things that I've shown you through this program, I'll guarantee that you will have a better holiday in the outback because you'll travel safer, because you're confident. You'll say, well, no worries here, I can do that, and of course you can. Some of the things I've showed you, try them home in your backyard. Hook a plastic bag on a tree and see how it gets the water out. You'll get a lot of fun out of this. And if all this fails, I've got one more little tip for you. Get a pack of cards and start playing patience. Just start playing patience. And I will guarantee that somebody will lean over your shoulder and say, look, that black 10 goes on that red jack. And then you can ask him for help. Nice knowing you. See you later. I've got some work to do.